The Hand and the Suitcase, an adultery tragedy between the wife and her best friend. A sweltering afternoon in the suburbs of Houston, Texas. Summer sun poured down on identical houses, neat white fences, and lawns trimmed as if from a postcard. But within that peaceful scene, one small detail disrupted everything. A strange smell. The old neighbor, Harold, 72, was used to the scent of freshly cut grass and BBQ smoke drifting from backyards every weekend. But that day, from house number 14, where Daniel and Emily Carter lived, came a very different odor. It wasn't sweet, nor was it familiar. It was a sharp, metallic stench, like rust soaked in rainwater, seeping into the air. Harold coughed harshly, grimaced, his heart skipping a beat. He knocked on the door. No answer, only the sound of a TV leaking through the crack, the announcer's voice lost in silence. Harold tried the knob, locked from inside. He walked around to the garage, planning to remind Daniel the door was ajar and unsafe. But as soon as he touched the handle, Harold froze. The stench from inside was overwhelming. Light seeped through the dim crack, shining on something strange in the corner of the garage. A large blue plastic container, its lid not fully closed, from which a dark liquid leaked, spreading across the concrete floor. The deep red stain spread like spilled wine, but thick, clotted in streaks. Harold felt his heart tighten as if gripped by a hand. He backed away, calling the police. His voice trembled. "You need to come right away. I think something terrible is here." Just minutes later, police sirens wailed, tearing through the sweltering air. 3 officers stepped out, broke the garage lock. When the lid of the container was pried open, they all froze. Inside, amid crumpled plastic sheets, a pale hand appeared, fingers curled as if desperately clutching at something. And on the ring finger, a silver band gleamed, a wedding ring. A young officer stammered, "My God, this is Emily Carter." Whispers echoed through the neighborhood. People poured out of their homes, standing behind the yellow tape. Many covered their mouths. Some women burst into tears, while children were hurried back inside. The garage, once just for cars and boxes, had now become the center of a nightmare. In that moment, the suburb, once proud of its peace, cleanliness, and weekend barbecues, was no longer a safe haven. It turned into a stage for crime, where the blazing Texas sunlight exposed a horrifying secret. And somewhere in the crowd, a chilling question rang out. If this is Emily, then where is Daniel? The Houston suburb, where Daniel and Emily Carter lived, was considered the model of the American dream. 2-story houses with gray roofs, lush green lawns, and children riding bicycles every evening. Here, everyone knew each other, sometimes holding BBQ parties together in the small park at the center of the neighborhood. Safety and tranquility, that was what people were most proud of when choosing to live here. Emily Carter, 34, was a gentlewoman and an elementary school teacher. She was often seen with a bright smile and a simple floral dress. Her students remembered her not only for her lessons, but also for the cookie box she often brought to class to share with each child. Emily was cheerful, loved writing journals, and once confided to a close friend, "No matter what life is, I only need a warm family. That's enough." Daniel Carter, 36, Emily's husband, carried a different image. He was a real estate agent, often well-dressed and smooth-spoken. To the neighbors, Daniel was successful, always boasting about big deals, but rarely seen spending time with his wife. The shadow of indifference, the distance in their marriage, gradually became what Emily often hid behind her smile. Leading the case was Detective Rebecca Monroe, 42, from the Houston Police Department. Rebecca was no stranger to family homicide cases. With sharp brown eyes and a calm demeanor, she often unsettled suspects with just a few direct questions. In the force, she was called Iron Monroe, not for being harsh, but because she peeled back the truth like layers of an onion, letting no one escape. Right after the plastic container was opened, Rebecca was there. She examined carefully, from the pale hand wearing a silver ring to the pungent odor rising from the plastic sheets. She didn't rush to conclude, only noted each detail meticulously, her eyes sweeping across the dark garage. To her, the scene always knew how to speak, if one listened long enough. The neighbors were still murmuring. A middle-aged woman whispered to the police, "Last week, I saw Emily shopping alone. She looked exhausted, her eyes swollen red. When I asked, she just smiled and said it was insomnia." Another person said quietly, "Daniel has been going out at night a lot lately. Once I saw his car parked at a bar near downtown, and he came home very late." All those small accounts, when pieced together, painted a picture. Emily was a gentle wife, trapped in a cold marriage, while Daniel seemed to be hiding many unknown secrets. Rebecca Monroe wrote down every statement, underlining 2 words in her notebook: Daniel missing. A question began to form in her mind: the husband, witness, or suspect? And then, as night fell over the Houston suburb, the yellow light from garage number 14 still glowed brightly. Inside, the plastic container had been sealed and taken for examination. Yet its aftershock haunted everyone. Beneath the perfect facade of an American family might lie a truth chilling enough to freeze an entire community. The next morning, the Houston Forensic Lab sent a preliminary report. The hand in the plastic container matched Emily Carter's DNA. The news hit the neighborhood like a bomb. Neighbors who once called her name among children's laughter now whispered to each other in trembling voices, "Emily is dead." Detective Rebecca Monroe entered the Carter home to search. The living room was spotless to an unusual degree. Not a speck of dust, no signs of disturbance. But it was that very over-tidiness that made her suspicious. A wedding photo frame sat askew on the shelf, the glass hastily wiped, showing faint scratches. In the bedroom, the sheets had been changed, but underneath, Rebecca found a piece of fabric stained with dark brown marks, likely missed during cleanup. In the garage, besides the plastic container, police also found a roll of duct tape and rubber gloves stuffed into a trash bag. The sharp smell of cleaning chemicals still lingered, as if someone had just cleaned up in a hurry. A close neighbor, Mrs. Judith, testified, "The night before last, I heard loud arguing. Emily was crying, and Daniel shouted, 'You don't understand. I need freedom.' The noise was so loud, like something heavy fell." Another witness, Mark, a former colleague of Emily, also came to the police station, trembling as he said, "She once texted me, saying she suspected Daniel had someone else. But I never thought." Rebecca quickly jotted in her notebook, "Affair, motive." Meanwhile, Daniel Carter officially became the prime suspect. He had been absent from home since the night before the container was found. His phone was off, and his car was missing from the garage. His disappearance made everyone believe this was no longer a simple missing person case. The police expanded the investigation, and a new name appeared: Claire Mitchell, Emily's best friend since college. The two had once been inseparable. Claire often visited the Carter home, and even had her own key to take care of the cat whenever the couple was away. But strangely, in the past 6 months, Emily had started to mention Claire less. In a diary found on her dressing table, Emily had written a few short lines. "Claire is so different now. Every time Daniel is around, She looks at him with strange eyes. I feel uneasy, but I'm afraid of losing the two people dearest to me. Rebecca read those lines and pressed her lips together. A tangled circle of emotions was beginning to take shape. The digital forensics team tracked the GPS signal of Daniel's car. They finally found his black SUV parked in a secluded lot near downtown Houston. In the trunk, they discovered evidence: several long brown hairs, identical to Emily's, and a blood-stained piece of fabric. All were sealed as evidence. When checking traffic cameras around the area, the police noted, on the night Emily disappeared, Daniel had driven to that very lot, stepping out alone in a hurry. But afterward, a woman also appeared, Claire Mitchell. The two exchanged words briefly, then separated, with Claire getting into a silver sedan. Rebecca needed no further words. She looked at Emily's photo in the case file, then at Claire's graduation picture on the wall. Once like sisters, the two now stood at opposite extremes, one dead tragically, the other possibly involved. When the police knocked on Claire's door, she appeared calm. I was shocked to hear about Emily, but I don't know anything, Claire said, her eyes avoiding contact. Rebecca sat across from her and quietly asked, Are you sure? Because I have camera footage of you meeting Daniel right after his wife disappeared. The room fell silent. Claire bit her lip, her hands clenched tightly, but she said nothing more. Only her eyes flickered with something: worry, fear, or perhaps guilt. In her notebook, Rebecca wrote a line, pressing the pencil hard. Primary suspect, Daniel Carter, killed wife. Possible accomplice, Claire Mitchell. From this point, the case was no longer a simple family tragedy. It began to reveal the outline of a conspiracy. One person who wanted to eliminate his wife to gain freedom, and another, perhaps the best friend, who helped cover up the truth. The small interrogation room, a yellow neon light shining directly on Daniel Carter's face. He sat in silence, hands clasped, eyes weary, lips cracked. Across the table, Detective Rebecca Monroe opened the thick case file. Each crime scene photo turned like a sharp, cold blade. Mr. Daniel, we found your wife's blood and hair in your car. Do you want to explain? Rebecca asked, her voice steady, not raised, but her gaze piercing through the calm facade Daniel tried to maintain. Daniel took a deep breath, exhaling. Emily, she left. I don't know anything. Rebecca tapped her pen lightly on the table, each click echoing evenly. Then she slid a photo of the plastic container forward. In the picture, the woman's hand with chipped red nail polish was clearly visible. This too, did Emily leave it behind? Daniel trembled, but still forced his voice. I didn't kill her. For a moment, the room was utterly silent. Outside, the rain drummed steadily on the tin roof of the Houston police station. Rebecca didn't rush. She was used to suspects denying everything to the end. But she knew that to break this stalemate, a push was needed. At the same time, in another room, Claire Mitchell was also being interrogated. At first, she stayed calm, claiming she had only run into Daniel that day by chance. But when the police presented the traffic camera footage showing Claire and Daniel speaking hurriedly, their eyes darting nervously around the street, that calm shattered. Claire bit her lip, her voice trembling. All right, I'll talk. But Daniel was the one who did it. I just helped him with a small thing. Rebecca walked into the second interrogation room, sitting across from Claire. A small thing, then make it clear. Claire lowered her head, hands clutching the water cup. Tears fell, blending with her broken voice. That night, Daniel called me. He said Emily fell down the stairs, hit her head hard, and was dead. He panicked, begged me to help. I love him. I have for a long time. I couldn't refuse. I helped him put the body into the plastic container. Then Daniel drove away. I only followed behind to make sure he was all right. Rebecca stayed silent, her eyes fixed on Claire. The story sounded so smooth that it was suspicious. You said you only followed, but why are your fingerprints on the lid of the container? Rebecca asked, placing another forensic photo on the table. Claire froze. Her eyes widened, then shut tightly, tears streaming down. In that instant, she was no longer a supporting witness, but a true accomplice. All right, yes, I touched it. I wanted to be sure Emily was really dead, but when I saw, I panicked. Daniel said we had to keep the secret together, or else we'd both lose everything. The room sank into heavy silence. Rebecca knew she had just untied one knot, but in doing so, opened up an even bigger tangle. Meanwhile, at the Carter House crime scene, the forensic team found another odd detail. The living room floorboards showed signs of being pried open. When lifted, they discovered a broken phone. Its screen shattered. It belonged to Emily. In its memory was a half-recorded audio file. Emily's trembling voice whispering, "Daniel, what are you doing? Don't," followed by a loud thud, crashing sounds. Then the signal cut off. The recording was immediately sent to Rebecca. She played it for Daniel. His face turned pale, eyes darting nervously, like a man cornered. "Do you still want to say Emily just walked away?" Rebecca asked, her voice cold and sharp. Daniel stayed silent. Sweat beaded on his temple. At this point, it seemed to the public that the case was clear. Daniel killed his wife. Claire was the accomplice. But Rebecca didn't close her notebook. One question troubled her. If Daniel was violent enough to kill his wife, why wouldn't he dispose of the body carefully, instead of leaving the container exposed? A smart man would hide the body, burn it, or bury it. Yet Daniel, a mechanical engineer with a logical mind, chose a sloppy disposal that was hard to believe. Rebecca sat alone in the room, eyes narrowed. In her head, a rhetorical question rang like a warning bell. Are we looking at the wrong side of the board? What if Daniel and Claire aren't just the killers, but pawns in someone else's game? She gently closed her notebook, but a spark lit in her eyes. This case was far from over. It had only just opened into a deeper layer. On a damp grey morning in Houston, drizzle streaked the police office windows. Detective Rebecca Monroe sat in the meeting room. In front of her, a whiteboard covered with photos, arrows, and notes. She held a cup of cold coffee, eyes fixed on the bold words. The abandoned container, why? The forensic team had just sent a supplemental report. Inside the container, with the pale hand, besides traces of blood, was a strand of blue polyester fabric mixed with tiny animal hair. Strangely, this fabric didn't match any of Emily's clothes, nor anything in the Carter house. So where did it come from? Rebecca frowned. A piece of fabric could be coincidence, but to her, in a case, nothing was ever coincidence. Also in the report, the DNA from the hand in the container confirmed 100% it was Emily Carter. But the more striking finding was the fingerprints. On the container walls, besides Daniel's and Claire's, there were prints from a third person, unidentified. Rebecca leaned back in her chair. The question drilled into her mind. If Daniel killed his wife in a fit of rage, then why were there fingerprints from someone else on the container? At that moment, a young officer brought in an envelope. "Detective, we've just extracted messages from Emily's phone before she disappeared." Rebecca opened it. The words on the screen appeared, and her heart clenched. The last message Emily sent to a close friend. "Something's wrong. I suspect Daniel is involved with Claire. They whisper behind my back. If I disappear, remember to look for them. The evidence was like a knife, confirming the affair. But Rebecca didn't stop there. She asked herself, if Emily suspected and sent this message, could it mean she had prepared to protect herself? The same day, technicians extracted data from the broken phone found under the Carter's floor. In the temporary memory, there was a half-recorded video. The screen shook, the angle unstable, but it was enough to see Daniel rushing toward Emily and behind him, a shadowy figure resembling Claire. Rebecca sat in silence, her hands gripping the pen tightly. This was no longer a simple husband kills wife over an affair. This was a staged play. She recalled the crime scene. The container discarded carelessly, easy to find. If Daniel was smart, he wouldn't have done that. But what if someone deliberately left it exposed to make Daniel carry all the blame? That afternoon, Rebecca called Claire back into the interrogation room. The yellow light shone on her pale face as she bit her lip repeatedly. Rebecca laid down the DNA report and a still from the video. Claire, are you sure you only helped Daniel clean up? Her voice was low and steady. Claire trembled slightly, her eyes darting aside. I don't know. Rebecca leaned forward, stressing each word. We saw you in the video. You were there when Emily collapsed. And that container, it wasn't left there by accident. Someone wanted it to be found. Was it you or Daniel? Claire burst into tears, streams running down her face. But between sobs, one sentence slipped out, shaking the entire room. It wasn't me. It was Daniel who wanted everyone to know. He said if he got caught, he'd drag me down with him. I couldn't lose everything. I just did exactly what he told me. Rebecca fell silent. Each testimony was like a layer of fog. The more she peeled back, the murkier the scene became. The case had now entered a new phase. No longer just about an affair, but a psychological game where both Daniel and Claire schemed and concealed. Who was the real killer? Who was dragged along? And who staged the deadly suitcase drama? Rebecca sipped her coffee, her eyes glinting with cold clarity. She knew the truth had surfaced, but it was incomplete. One more push, and the whole picture would come into view. The interrogation room sank under the weary yellow light. Claire cried and trembled, while Daniel sat silent in the other cell, his eyes empty like a winter lake. Inspector Rebecca Monroe sat motionless, eyes narrowing as if listening to a discordant tune, every detail from Claire's testimony, every DNA fragment forming a disturbing harmony. She took a deep breath, pushed the files aside, and stood up. Something was wrong. That night, Rebecca returned to the Carter house once more, as light rain fell. The suburban home stood isolated, its windows fogged with mist. Under her flashlight, she traced every corner. The kitchen still reeked of bleach, but on the wooden boards near the sink, she spotted faint scratches. She bent closer, shining her light sideways, parallel marks like a blade dragged across the surface. Cleaning in panic. But not very carefully, Rebecca muttered. In the garage, amid scattered repair tools, an old seat cover lay crumpled. Her flashlight revealed a dark red stain turned brown. Rebecca carefully wrapped it and sealed it. The next morning, the special investigation team's briefing room buzzed. The new forensic report arrived. The seat cover carried blood from 2 people. One was Emily's, the other from an unidentified woman. Rebecca braced her hands on the table, her eyes flashing. Another one. If that was true, this case was no longer just a wife killing. It was a series of calculated crimes. She decided to play a bold move. Rebecca had Claire and Daniel separated into 2 adjacent interrogation rooms, then adjusted the recording system so each would overhear the other's voice. In one room, Daniel slumped over the table. In the other, Claire sobbed. But when he heard Claire cry out, "Daniel forced me. He killed Emily." Daniel shot up, his eyes blazing. "She's lying. She struck Emily first. I only tried to stop it," Daniel shouted, slamming his hand on the table. Rebecca stood behind the one-way mirror, listening to everything. She allowed herself a faint smile. The truth didn't need to be forced with violence. Just let them tear each other apart. 2 days later, forensics delivered the DNA results of the second blood sample. It matched Melissa Grant, a 29-year-old woman who had gone missing nearly a year ago, and who was Melissa. She was Claire's best friend from college. Rebecca closed her eyes for a moment. The layers of the veil were slowly falling. In the decisive interrogation, Rebecca laid Melissa's photo in front of Claire. Claire's face turned pale, her hands gripping the chair tightly. "Melissa, I don't know." Her voice choked. Rebecca cut her off, her voice steady and cold. "Her blood was found in the Carter's garage. And you were the last person to text Melissa before she disappeared. Do you still want to deny it?" Claire jolted. Finally, like an over-tightened string, she broke down in tears. "That night, Emily caught me and Daniel. She went mad, called Melissa over to reveal everything. But when Melissa arrived, it all spun out of control. Daniel pushed Emily. Her head hit hard. I panicked, and Melissa screamed she'd call the police. Daniel lunged at her. I couldn't stop it." The room fell deathly silent, broken only by ragged breathing. Rebecca stared hard at Claire. "Then who left the suitcase by the snowy road?" Claire bit her lip until it bled, then whispered, "Daniel," he said. He wanted the world to know, but not the truth, only the version he created. A suitcase, a hand, a game to bind me as his accomplice forever. Late in the afternoon, Rebecca stepped out of the precinct. The rain had stopped, but Houston's sky still churned, undecided between clearing and storming. In her mind, the case stood clear like a chessboard. Daniel Carter, the mastermind, the manipulator, who both killed and staged the suitcase drama to control his lover. Claire Donovan, from accomplice in love to accomplice in crime, both victim and perpetrator. Melissa Grant, a buried name, now a silent witness condemning them both. Rebecca clenched her hand. Every case was a match, and in this overtime, darkness seemed to have won. But with just one small turn, the truth had been dragged into the light. She looked up at the sky, her eyes sharp as steel. A rhetorical question escaped her, like a commentary addressed to all. How many more cases must be buried in suitcases before people understand no truth can ever stay locked away forever? The courtroom of Harris County, Houston, Texas, was packed. Reporters crowded the hallways, camera flashes lighting up the witnesses' faces. People called it the suitcase trial, the case that shook America, not only for its gruesome nature, but for how love, betrayal, and greed intertwined into a tragedy with no escape. Daniel Carter was led in. He had grown thinner, hair neatly combed but eyes empty, cold as steel. Claire Donovan followed, her face gaunt, eyes wet with tears. A mastermind, an accomplice, yet both wore the faces of those who had sacrificed everything for a forbidden love. The prosecutor began, "Your Honor, we are not just trying a murder. We are looking at the consequence of accumulated lies, of an affair turned into a machine that crushed lives. Emily Carter, a wife, a daughter, a devoted teacher, paid with her life. and Melissa Grant, a best friend, dragged into the spiral, was erased simply because she dared to tell the truth. The courtroom fell silent. Only the scratch of pens and the steady rap of the judge's gavel remained. Claire's testimony became the crucial turning point. She admitted part of her guilt, that out of fear and dependence on Daniel, she had not stopped him but helped conceal the crime. That confession moved many to tears. A woman led from infidelity to complicity, sliding down an irreversible slope. Daniel was different. He never once showed remorse. When the judge asked, "Do you have anything to say before the jury delivers its verdict?" he gave a faint smile, his voice flat, as if reciting a math formula. "People don't kill out of hate, but out of possession. Emily was mine, Claire was mine. Anyone who opposed had to disappear." His words sent a shiver through the entire courtroom. When the gavel struck, the verdict was delivered. Daniel Carter, first-degree murder, body disposal, inciting an accomplice, sentenced to death by lethal injection. Claire Donovan, accomplice to murder, covering up a crime, sentenced to 30 years in prison, with a chance of reduction if she cooperates with further investigations. In the courtroom, Emily's family broke down in tears. Her elderly mother clutched her daughter's photo with trembling hands. Melissa's friends held hands tightly, lighting candles right on the courthouse steps. They knew the verdict couldn't bring Emily or Melissa back, but at least justice had been named. Detective Rebecca Monroe stood in the courthouse hallway. She did not step into the spotlight of the press cameras. She only quietly watched the small candles flicker in the night wind. Each flame was a life stolen, a voice silenced. A reporter approached and asked, "Detective, what does this case teach us?" Rebecca spoke slowly, her voice hoarse after many sleepless nights, that the truth never dies. It may be locked in a suitcase, hidden in a basement, buried under cold earth, but it will return through a scream, a severed foot, or a drop of blood left behind. And we must all understand, silence means helping the darkness. That night, at the Western Houston Cemetery, 2 fresh graves were covered in flowers. One for Emily, the wife who had to die in her own home. One for Melissa, the friend who only wanted to tell the truth. The night sky glittered with stars, but the cold wind still cut through the skin. Relatives gathered, whispering the names of the 2 women, as if to give them one last right to exist. Rebecca stood at a distance, bringing no flowers, only a small candle. She placed it at the foot of the gravestone, the trembling light reflecting on her gaunt face. In her heart, she knew she was only one of many who must carry the light. The true brightness had to be lit by society together. This case will be written into files, turned into documentaries, taught as warnings in criminology classes. But for those who lived through the nightmare, it will forever be an unhealed scar. One of Rebecca's lines at the final press conference became the message of the entire story. Justice cannot bring back the dead, but justice can prevent other hands from being stained with blood. And we, by speaking out, not staying silent, are part of that justice. The story closes, but its echoes remain. A suburban house that seemed peaceful, a cold suitcase, and 2 women who had to die because love was twisted into possession. It is not only their tragedy, but a lesson for all of us. That truth may be hidden, but it never disappears.